Good morning. I'd like to call this meeting to order. Today is Tuesday, January 19th, 2016. It's 9 a.m. We're at the Palm Coast City Hall for the regularly scheduled meeting of the Palm Coast City Council. Would you please rise and join me in a pledge of allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. Roll call, please.
Vice Mayor Shipley?
Vice Mayor Shipley?
Here. Sorry. Councilmember DiLorenzo is excused. Councilmember McGuire?
Here.
Councilmember Nobile?
Here.
Mayor Netz?
Here. Just for information of the public, Councilman DiLorenzo is excused. He's attending the funeral of his grandmother. I would ask that you remember the DiLorenzo family in your prayers. First item on our agenda is the approval of the December 15th City Council meeting and the January 12th City Council workshop. Are there any additions, corrections, or is there a motion for approval?
Move to approve. Second.
Moved in second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries without objection. Agenda item number 2, presentation of the Pink Army 5K proceeds donation to the Florida Hospital Flagler Foundation Cancer Fund.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, council members. I'm Ginger Parnell. I'm the event supervisor for the Parks and Recreation Department. What we would like to do today is two things. One is we would like to recognize Florida Hospital Flagler. I'd like to invite Lauren Dye, who is the marketing director, and Joanne King, who is the COO. Because of their sponsorship, we had a very successful 2015 Senior Games, and we would like to recognize them as the presenting sponsor. It was the Flagler Hospital Flagler Health Partners and the Orthopedic Group, so we just have a small gift to thank you for your contribution. I'd also like to announce that Florida Hospital Flagler has renewed sponsorships for every one of the special events that the City of Palm Coast is holding this year. That is the Birding Festival, the Senior Games, and the International Festival, and we certainly appreciate their contribution. Also like to call up John Subers he's the Regional Executive Director of the Foundation for Florida Hospital Flagler and the Director of the Pink Army Race that the City of Palm Coast is part of, not only with the running series, but also with the partner. And John and the Foundation was also a sponsor for the Pink Army Race as well. And because of his volunteers and the community and the response, John, we would like to present this check to you in the amount of $12,585.35. And this will go directly to the Pink Army Foundation. And we'd like to have a photo if...
We got to say a few words.
I'm sorry, John always wants to speak, I'm sorry.
And I'm not letting him. I'd like to thank Ginger for my promotion this morning. She jokingly called me CEO. Ken is at a conference in Orlando today and sends his regards and his gratitude as well. On behalf of Florida Hospital Flagler, we'd like to thank you all for your support of the Pink Army and its initiatives. Also want to thank our chair, Helga Van Eckert, who could not be with us today, and the United Way Women's Initiative. They were strong partners in this effort. Mayor Netz and the city, thank you so much for your help. And mark your calendars for October 16th is the next Pink Army race coming up, and that will be here before we know it. The Pink Army is making a difference. With these funds, you will see that women who perhaps could not have access to screening mammograms and such do get that access. Since the last 5K in October of 2014, 64 women received 81 different procedures, screening mammograms, diagnostic mammograms, ultrasounds, and biopsies. And out of those 64, I have no doubt you saved a life. So on behalf of Florida Hospital Flagler, thank you.
Do we come on the other side of the wall, or do you come here?
Why don't we come to you?
Okay.
Well, that's good news, Mayor, that's if you're not wheeling around.
Used to be a city council member, but he's on our board.
Oh, excellent, okay.
All right, we're gonna need to squeeze.
You squeeze in, and if you can back up.
I'm gonna move this.
Can't go very far.
Oops.
All right, everybody ready? Excuse me, I'm not very tall. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2. 1, 2, 3. Just a few more. Sure, I'm taking
And this brings us to agenda item number 3, presentation on the Birds of a Feather Fest. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, it's amazing how many friends of birds we have in this community and actually throughout Florida and the world. And last year we had our first birding festival here in Palm Coast. It was extremely successful. We have another one coming up, so this one kind of highlights what we did last year and helps promote what is coming up here in a few weeks. Jason is our event planner for this. He's an avid bird watcher. So Jason, take it from here.
Good morning, Mayor, City Council. For the record, Jason Giralla, Digital Communications Coordinator. I can't believe I've been here 5 years and I've been able to get away with doing a presentation until today. So I guess my luck streak has run out. First, we'll just start out with a short video about last year's festival.
Florida's got quite a few festivals. This is a new one, the one we're at here, the Birds of a Feather Festival in Palm Coast. It's a great festival. They've hit the ground running. They've done a really fantastic job of organizing it. My wife and I do festivals all over Florida, and we're pretty impressed with this one so far. It's a great area to go birding right between Daytona Beach and St. Augustine. I take people all over the state of Florida. I'm a lifelong birder and naturalist in Florida. I really enjoy it. I really enjoy sharing it with people. And Palm Coast is a great area. It's one of my favorite parts of Florida. Birding is something you can do anywhere you go. It's a great hobby for me as a naturalist. I get to learn about what birds are in an area throughout Florida. Birding, unlike sports or golf or football or anything, the only thing you need is a good pair of binoculars, maybe a bird book. And you can go to your local park, you can go to your yard, you can walk down the street, you can look at birds just about anywhere that you go. And Florida is a great place. We got over 500 species of birds in Florida. If you want to go to every corner of Florida like I do, I've seen only 453 of those species so far, but it's just something, anywhere you travel, anywhere you go, there's going to be birds out there. So once you get birding, you'll never be bored. You can always go somewhere. And Florida attracts birders from all over the place. We have people from all over the world, literally, that come to Florida to look for birds. And they stay here, they buy gas, they eat at the restaurants, they stay in hotels. It's a great economic boon for the area. And it's free. I mean, you can just keep doing it. You're not going to use up the birds if you preserve the areas where the birds are. That's an economic engine forever, theoretically. If you've got non-birding members of the family, you can come here and they can go to St. Augustine, they can go to Daytona, they can hang around here. There's a lot to do besides birding in the area. This is the Birds of a Feather Festival in Palm Coast, and it's a great way if you want to learn about birds and birding. Festivals are a great way to do that because there's people. You have lots of people here. You won't just go to a park and you're the only person looking for birds. You have lots of people all coming here to look at birds, learn about the area. You can learn from classes, take beginning birding classes, go to field trips. If you're curious about a local park and you want to know what birds are there, come to the festival. You'll have an expert guide. You can go out there and you find out about it. And then the great thing is if you're from this area, you can keep going back to those areas and keep discovering more and more stuff there. And once you learn to bird, you can go to you can go grocery shopping and see really neat birds right there in the parking lot. I've seen some pretty neat stuff popping into the post office in Fellsmere one time. I had a Mississippi kite flying over the post office. They're a really rare bird, and I was just mailing a letter. It makes things like going to the post office fun and exciting sometimes when you're a birder. It's a great thing to do. Florida's a great place to do it all year round, but especially now in the wintertime, it's the best time.
And so just a couple of little highlights. First off, the festival is February 5 through 7 this year, so mark that on your calendars if you're interested. Some of the really big things that set us apart, a lot of festivals focus on just serious birders, and we really want to include everybody in the community. If you've never picked up a pair of binoculars, if you've never been to any of our trails before, this is the festival for you. You get to come there. Lots of the things that we do on Saturday especially are free for families. We build birdhouses. We have free bird walks all day long on Saturday for free down Linear Park. So it's something that families can do together, and that's one of the big staples of the festival, is it really is for families. As you heard in the video, he talks about some of the economic impact, and it really is an engine. Birders travel. It's one of the things that my wife and I do on the weekends. We spend our weekends driving all over the state. So they come here, they stay in our hotels, they eat at our restaurants, they buy stuff in our stores. Just last year, we had attendees from Canada. This year we have a couple coming from Mexico, Seattle, New York, Boston, Texas, and of course all over the Southeast. So they're flying here just for the festival. In fact, I spoke to a couple last year. It was coming from Canada. It was minus 38 degrees where they were, and we were in the 50s. So they were thrilled, not just for the birds, but for the weather. But I'd just like to invite each of you to come and participate. Come see what the festival has to offer. It's really a special weekend. Yes, sir.
Where and what time?
Okay, it's going to be February 5 through 7. All the things leave from the community center. So you go to the community center and the trips leave from there. You can go to birdingfest.com and find out more information or to register. If you think of this as not just like a festival, but more like a conference, you go online and you register for the events you want to attend. All of them have limited participation, or most of them have limited participation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Congratulations, job well done.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 4, a resolution approving a partial easement vacation, a utility easement, and final plat for Grand Landings Phase 1A. Mr. Lanning.
Mayor, City Council, this is a pretty basic plat, but it does have a little twist with the easement that's being relocated. Constance will walk you through the details.
Good morning, Mayor and council members.
Morning.
I'm presenting to you Grand Landings Phase 1. It's a final plat, which will include easements that pertain to the recording of that plat. The property is located south of 100 and the airport, west of I-95, and east of US 1 and Belterre Parkway. It's approximately 774 acres of land for Phase 1, and Phase 1A is 2.98 acres. More specifically, it's located south of Spoonbill Drive, which is off of Grand Landings Parkway. The Phase 1 plat has 89 lots, and we are adding another 11. So that's located right in here. The future land use is residential, and the zoning district is master plan development. It's master plan to have 749 single-family residential lots when it's completely platted and subdivided, with about 150 square feet of commercial, as well as having a park, which a site plan for the park was previously already approved. This is a representation of the plat for the 11 lots. The lots range from 8,000 square feet to 13,000 square feet, which exceeds the minimum lot size of 6,250 square feet. There are no roadways in this plat. The roadways are already existing from Phase 1. I want to talk a little bit about the easements and why we are requesting easements in the resolution that support this, the plat. First of all, let's notice that there are lots with existing roadways from Phase 1 plat. Phase 1 plat was approved by Flagler County before it was annexed into the city, and the roadways did not have utility easements over them, although there are utilities under the road. So one of the easements we're asking for is a utility easement over all the roadways in Phase 1. There's also a utility easement running across the tract of land that's represented in the blue on the screen. And the portion of that easement we're asking to vacate is in the red area here. And that's the area that encumbers the lots that we are requesting to subdivide. As you can see, the red area represents the existing easement, and it runs through lots 2 through 5. So we are requesting to vacate that portion of the easement. There is already an easement between lots 2 and 3 where the utilities have been relocated and connected to the utilities that are already in the right-of-way. So the blue area on the screen will represent the new location of utility easements to support these 11 lots, as well as having the utility easement over all the roadways within that development. As a condition to the plat, we are asking for title searches, that the applicant provide those to us before we record the plat. And I'll go over a couple of reasons why this special condition was added. The property that's being subdivided is now in Grand Landings Phase 1. All the roadways are in Grand Landings Phase 1. That was approved back in 2007. So in order to verify who the actual owner is of the road, before we place an easement on it and who can sign and for that easement, we would like to get a title search to verify the ownership of those roadways. Also, if there's mortgages in Phase 1, because Phase 1A is being a replat of Phase 1, we want to make sure that there are no mortgage encumbrances on Phase 1A. If there are, we would need additional people signing on the plat. So staff recommendation is a partial vacation of the plat, that area in red that I showed in the previous screen, granting of a utility easement over all of the right-of-ways in Grand Landings Phase 1, and approve the final plat for Grand Landings Phase 1A subdivision, and authorize the mayor to execute that replat upon receipt of title services verifying the ownership and the mortgage encumbrances.
Mayor, if I may add, before we get into questions, the title search is actually a standard condition. We do that for all plats. The difference in why you're seeing that here today is because we're trying to expedite this for the applicant, and legal counsel has not seen those title searches, and then they will tweak to make sure any names on the resolutions of the plat are exactly as per the ownership. This is standard. It's just the applicant hadn't submitted the application or the title search in time. So we're just asking for the condition to make sure that legal counsel is comfortable with the documents before they're recorded. Pretty standard stuff. The other thing, as far as the easement, I'd like to just summarize is that, in essence, the new easements reflect where the utilities are versus the old easement that we're vacating, that we've abandoned those utilities already. So this is just, in essence, making the legal documents consistent with what's out in the field. So it's really pretty simple situation.
Jim, who pays for the title search?
The applicant. It's a standard process. You have to have that because it is a legal property type document, just like when you would close on property, same situation. Nothing unusual.
Other council questions? Seeing none, we'll open the meeting for the public. Any from the public wish to be heard on this agenda item? Please come up to the podium, give us your name, and limit your contribution to 3 minutes.
My name is Jerry Finley, Finley Engineering Group. I'm the engineer for the subdivision and the rest of Grand Landings. Constance laid it all pretty well out for us. The title searches were provided to the city late Friday for the easements. Obviously, with the holiday yesterday, nobody had a chance to look at them, but they are in the city's hands now, so that shouldn't be an issue anymore. Really, this is somewhat of a housekeeping effort. Also, the original Grand Landings Phase 1 plat kind of generally and vaguely reserved the easements for the utilities, and then also vacated the existing easement by note on the plat. But it really wasn't clear, and to just be totally legal, we're doing this easement and the vacation. We'll be happy to answer any questions you have.
Thank you. Next speaker.
I just want a little question. Who maintains that road that they're getting, whatever it is they get? Is it city or is it private? And is that a gated community?
Get you an answer. Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing none approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting. Council, before we come to that question from Mr. Carroll, do you have any questions for Mr. Finley? Okay, so who maintains the road?
It is a private road to be maintained by the Homeowners Association. And yes, it is a gated community. It's existing. You can drive out there and see it today.
Additional questions, comments, or a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries without objection.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 5, a resolution approving the contract for the purchase and sale of vacant land at 19 Sentinel Trail for the construction and permanent access to the water control structure and canal. Mr. Landon.
Mayor, City Council, this is one of our typical, when ITT developed Palm Coast, they owned all of Palm Coast, and they didn't worry about getting access to some of the infrastructure. And so they just want to cross lots that they own. But then they sold all those lots, and then the city took over the infrastructure, and we struggle sometimes with actually getting access to it. This particular one is a request to purchase a lot to get access to a weir that's already failed, and one that we've been waiting for and been attempting to obtain for quite some time. During the workshop, Mr. McGuire asked an excellent question as to why exactly do we have to have a weir, and is it really necessary to rebuild the weir and maintain it? And really appreciate the opportunity, and so we're going to take that opportunity to talk about our stormwater system, because it is different than what most people are used to, and there are purposes behind the canals, because from a strictly a flood or stormwater standpoint, we just let the water flow directly into the intercoastal or the swamp. But for a number of other reasons, that is not permitted. And so Don is going to highlight where this is and then get into the purpose of weirs and a little bit about our stormwater system.
Good morning. Thank you. And yeah, it is a very good point. When we brought this up last week, this is strictly for access. We've done this before. This particular weir has been in disrepair and basically non-functioning for quite some time. It's always been on our capital improvement plan, but we keep moving it back for other priorities and simply for lack of access. We've tried several times over the years to purchase this piece of property or one of the pieces of property there. With no success, this opportunity came up, so we're taking this opportunity to pick up this piece of land. This is actually the structure itself that's back there. It's basically non-functioning. The idea of, most council is aware that the idea behind a weir is to retain water and allow it to percolate back into the ground, recharge the aquifer, and provide some kind of control over the water level. This one, basically that pipe is actually a 4-foot diameter pipe, and at any given time, there's 3 feet of it exposed, plus the height of the weir. So the water level in the area is down. The groundwater level in the area is down by a couple feet at all times. Some of the benefits, simple, access. Right now we can get back there, but we have to cross through private lots now and go through a very small trail to get through. There's no access for heavy equipment. That structure is part of our master stormwater system. It's one of our many 31 structures that we actually use, and it's supposed to be there. And again, the idea is to retain water, allow it to recharge the aquifer, provide treatment.
Which, Don, let me add, means that by our permit with the state and the federal government, this weir is required. In other words, we're required by that permit to maintain our master stormwater system as it was originally designed. So this is not just a nice to have, it's a required to have.
Sure, absolutely. And as you're aware, up until 2010, we really didn't have a capital improvement plan. We've been working on these structures ever since then. And we've replaced quite a few of them already. We've been very successful. But we do have issues like last year with PA1. We had an issue. This happens. We've been fortunate. That's the only one that's happened in quite a long time. But maintenance is part of the requirement. It's part of the, it was always part of the master plan. So we're just restoring what is actually in the master plan. I already talked about recharging the aquifer. It helped out. It will help out the aquifer and give us more access to water for the well sites. Stormwater treatment, it's always been a big player in this. Getting it treated before it actually goes into the aquifer. And there's also an environmental effect to this. If you go out there now, yes, there's hardly any water there, but there's also no fish, there's also no turtles, there's also no gators. When we rebuilt the structure behind the yacht club, we had a similar situation. The structure had blown out, the wetland had basically dried out, and it had been that way for a year or two. And not even being an environmentalist, I could go and see that it was in pretty rough shape. We restored that structure, come back a year later, and it's thriving. Birds are back, the otters are back, fish are back. And the same thing will happen here once we actually get it put back together. So Any questions?
Council questions?
Don, Mr. Lennon said that if we have to have this here per the state and federal, have we been cited by any government because this thing is not operable?
No, we have not.
Why?
We actually don't have any, and Juan might be able to chime in on this, but we actually don't have any issues. It's not like it's an endangerment to anybody. We haven't raised any flags to anybody yet.
You probably are not aware of it, to tell you the truth.
Right, but
Got other weirs like this that are in danger of us getting cited?
Yes.
How many?
I'm sorry, I missed the question.
How many other weirs do we have that need to be replaced to maintain the stormwater system as originally designed?
We have, off the top of my head, this one actually has a companion structure that's a little farther to the south, not as bad a shape, but similar, leaks excessively, so it's down a little bit. We still have some control over that one. And then there's a very, very small one that's actually off of Old Kings Road that is not there. And they're also in our capital plan to actually be replaced.
Mr. McGuire, if you recall, we replace at least one weir a year.
I know.
And then it's a matter of priorities, and the larger ones that hold back a lot more water are higher priority,
And I
particularly.
agree with that, Mr. Lannon, but if we're in danger of being fined by the government, should we not at least have a consideration of accelerating some of these?
As soon as we get access, the infrastructure team has already started talking about how we can accelerate moving this one forward. And once again, the regulatory agencies, as long as you have a plan and as long as you show that you're making an effort, and as we always have with all the improvements we've done, they're going to work with us. So we aren't at the threat of being fined, but we do need to keep moving forward with the capital plan, or else they do start bringing the hammer down.
I would just like to see, and I discussed this with our stormwater folks last week, if it was all put on the table to do it once, what are we talking about in terms of capital? And I realize that we're not prepared to answer that here today, but I just want to see what's the difference from a city council standpoint if we schedule one of these a year out into whenever, or put them all in 1 year and get them all done at once.
That would be a big price tag, a
Yeah,
huge price
they
tag.
average $400,000 a piece, so depending on what it is.
Yeah, I mean, we could take the number that we have on our capital plan and times 400. We can get that type of thing. We've made
I
those
think it
presentations.
should be considered.
Yeah.
Okay.
And we do have cost estimates throughout our 10-year capital plan.
And as we discussed last week in the meeting that you had, how many, and I don't think I got an answer, how many more stormwater system control devices do not have access?
Good question. Actually, I believe,
If you can't get to it, you can't fix it regardless of what we approve.
this one's the last one that we actually just couldn't get to. We have some that don't have great access, but we do still have access to. And I believe this is the last one that just almost
Thank
had
you.
virtually no access.
And my last question is, a lot of the stormwater control systems that we put in where we do have access, well, they all do, many of them are problematic to the city from the standpoint that there's vandalism and various types of hooligan activities that go out there. Is this one going to be the same? I know you can't say for sure, but...
Yeah, I would love to say no, because this one is one of the few that's actually in the woods. Most people probably don't even know it's there. The one developed lot next to it is probably the only person in the area that knows that it's actually there.
So if I wanted to take some of my friends and go out in the woods and smoke some dope, I probably wouldn't choose this one.
Don't answer that. Do not answer
I was going to say, okay, got me with that one. But in all fairness, we get vandalism, not a lot.
I know.
Every place we do one of these, we do draw attention, and generally the attention is more favorable. We end up with people fishing, just hanging out, Three Sisters Complex is a great one. People are always there fishing. R1 on Royal Palms and Belterre, you can go by almost any time and see somebody fishing.
I've seen a lot of them.
And most people are very good stewards of the area, and they clean up after themselves. They don't vandalize anything. So we're actually doing pretty good.
The council questions?
We've been doing studies on the flood areas, and is this an area that has problems? And would this alleviate that, if so? Some of that.
I can't answer that because I'm not part of that whole study.
But you could say whether or not it's been modeled with our modeling plan.
Right.
I'll chime in. This area hasn't been modeled yet.
Okay.
We do have some criteria as far as modeling, mostly complaints and high water levels in certain areas during storm events. So this area does tend to drain a little bit better than others.
Okay.
So it's on the radar, but not, not a high priority. Right.
Okay.
And actually, if I can add, this particular water system backs up all the way, the canal actually goes all the way to Seminole Woods, but it actually cuts off and has a connection to what's considered Dry Lake, which is, I'm not sure how many acres Dry Lake is, but it's an overflow area.
Yeah.
It's an extra retention area for this section.
Good.
Other questions? Open the meeting to the public. Any from the public wish to be heard on this agenda item? Excuse me.
Jack Cowell from Palm Coast. First, why is it available now and it wasn't available in the past? Is there a money situation involved here where the guy is getting it more now than he would have years ago? And at the workshop, I understood that this is 3 years in the coming to put this weir in. And I'm wondering, so if it's 3 years in the coming, why is it so important that we're voting on it now? And then the last question is, there's no fish. Who's going to put the fish in? Is that going to be our problem?
Thank you. Next speaker.
Ron Radford. My question is, pollutants and other raw materials flowing into these streams, are we going to have a problem later on with the EPA, or is that under control right now? Pesticides, etc.
We'll get an answer for you. Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we'll close the public portion of the meeting, come back to council. But first, why now? Is it a money factor? Why is this access lot available today and it wasn't available 10 years ago?
First of all, the $9,000 is the appraised value, so we're paying what the appraiser said the property is worth. Secondly, and more directly, the question is, before we always dealt with mom, now we're dealing with the daughter. And the daughter wants to sell and mom didn't want to sell, so the family situation has changed, and the daughter has said yes, she would like to take the money for the property. So that's when the opportunity came up, and they knew we were interested, so they contacted us, and we were able to work it out, is how that worked. As far as the environmental issues, the pesticides, et cetera, that's what we talk about stormwater treatment. This actually helps in that. That's the whole idea, is to hold back the water, let it filter through the ground instead of having it go directly into the swamp and the intercoastal. So yes, there's always monitoring of our water system to meet the Clean Water Act. This weir will help us meet those requirements when it is fully functional, as all the weirs do. So that's actually a plus in this case.
And just to comment for the benefit of the public, this is an issue of vision. We know that where Palm Coast is located, water is not an abundant commodity. We have to go searching for it. And our water sources are the superficial and intermediate aquifer. we're desperately in need of recharge of those aquifers. I remember a number of years ago in a meeting with the St. Johns River Water Management District, we actually considered a phenomenon called back pumping. We were going to go down to where the freshwater canals entered the intracoastal, put a dike there, put a pump there, pump the water back up so it would flow downhill again. The whole idea is the more the water remains in contact with the surface, the more will be absorbed into the superficial and intermediate aquifer, and the better chance that we have of using that water in years to come. So to me, yes, is this urgent that we do it now? No, but it is part of a long-range plan to ensure a continuing water supply for Palm Coast as it grows.
Mayor, my favorite attorney pointed out I didn't answer the fish question.
Yeah, where are the fish coming from?
Well, the fish come from the rest of the canal system. This is actually tied into a larger system, as we said, and so as heavy rains happen, overflow of other weirs, et cetera, into this, the critters will come too, including the fish. So it's all part of the natural system. I'd also like to point out, to further highlight your comments, Mayor, that the next item is part of our raw water supply for treatment plant number 2, and it's right in this area. So this actually helps recharge that aquifer, which is that long-term vision, and how the canals and the weirs actually are tied into our water supply.
Are there additional council questions, comments, or a motion on agenda item number 5?
Move to approve.
Second.
Second, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now, I'm just curious. We have a consent agenda of one item.
What we do.
As is always the case with a consent agenda, I'd like to offer the opportunity for the public to speak about agenda item 6 before the council acts on it as a consent item. Would anyone from the public like to speak on consent agenda item number 6?
Do you have any kind of a presentation?
Do you have a presentation on this?
Now, we can show you a map, but that'd be all we have.
Okay, why don't we do that for Mr. McGuire?
With some pictures.
He likes pictures.
Keeps us calm.
Yeah, it's like having a cartoon before the main event.
Okay. You remember those days, Bill? There were a couple cartoons in a Western and then the main feature?
Or Commando Cody, you had Commando Cody in there too.
I don't remember.
Tell the older folks in the audience, the ones who laugh, they know what we're talking about.
That's for the record, I don't know anything about that.
As you can see on the screen, if we can put it up on the,
You probably never even saw Bomba the Jungle Boy.
there you go. It's the red section. It's the raw water supply line along Seminole Woods. The green is the second phase. The red squares with the P's in them are our new well sites. The idea why we're doing just this one phase is because we have a grant to complete the path along Seminole Woods from Sesame Boulevard to US 1, and it's always good to put the utility in first so you don't have to redo the path. So we're getting this water line in as quickly as possible so that we can meet the timeline of the grant dollars. And so the next phase you'll see will be the green raw water supply line. The wells are in the process already. We already have approval to drill those. So this is just the next phase of a project that's already in motion.
Council questions? Since this is a consent agenda item, and we did not remove it from the consent agenda, is there a motion to approve the consent agenda as submitted?
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries that objection. This brings us to the public participation portion of the meeting. This is the opportunity for the public to speak on any item not on today's agenda. Please come up to the podium, give us your name, and limit your contribution to 3 minutes.
Steve Carr, Palm Coast. Want to talk about Code of Ordinance, City of Palm Coast, Florida, Chapter 24, Environment, Article 2, Division 1, Section 24-31, Paragraph G. It is the public policy of the city to regulate and abate the activities which are causing or which may cause pollution of air, water, and soil resources in the city, where are or may be detrimental to human, animal, or aquatic or plant life or property, or which may be unreasonable, interfere with the comfortable enjoyment of life or property within the city, to ensure continued safe environment, to ensure purity of air, water, and soil, to ensure domestic and public water supplies, to ensure protection of the public health, safety, and welfare, and to provide for recreational and wildlife needs as the population increases and the economy expands. On Florida Park Drive, there's 8,000 plus cars per day, 560 trucks per day. Just 60 feet from the homes, just 60 feet from the homes. So this air pollution is harming the health of the residents. Not only the air pollution, the noise pollution. Not only the noise pollution, but the traffic dust pollution. So there's a lot of problems with all this traffic on Florida Park Drive. This is my opinion. Euthanasia by traffic does not just target elderly for early death. It targets children to lifelong struggles with diseases such as leukemia, diabetes, and asthma, just to name a few. It's not going to harm any health of any driver for the city to fix this problem. But to not fix it is going to continually harm all the residents that live on Florida Park Drive. 8,000 cars, 560 trucks per day is just too much. So please do whatever you can to fix this problem. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next speaker.
Louis McCarthy, Palm Coast. A while back, I asked that signs or something, reflectors, be put on Pine Grove and Pine Tree. And the last, and I wish to thank Nestor for getting on it. He said, "Didn't you see it at the last workshop?" And I hadn't. And then I came along and I said, "Oh, shucks, they did it. The reflector, see, they only had it on one side, so you couldn't see it on another side. So what they did was they put them on both sides, so now, whichever direction you're coming from, you can see these reflections. It's still bad to have a bench so close to the roadway, but hey, somebody gets something out of it. I'm not going to sit near it, but somebody will get something out of it, and something at least was done. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. A man in the news.
Howard Pfeiffer, Palm Coast Fire Department. I'd just like to convey a message to the mayor and the city council, the officers and members of the Lower Cloverleaf Fork Fire Department, and Harlan County, Kentucky Emergency Management Director expressed their sincere appreciation to our city council and all the city Palm Coast employees that were involved in getting them the 1986 Mack fire engine, which was donated to them. Since our local Palm Coast press release about the donation, several Palm Coast residents have made donations to this little Kentucky Volunteer Fire Department in a depressed coal mining area in the mountains of Kentucky. I spent several days there teaching firefighters how to operate the engine and witnessed their 3 broken fire engines and the 1967 Ford fire engine that was donated by a neighboring department so they continue to operate. Their fire station is heated by a coal furnace located in the apparatus room and is kept going by volunteers 24/7 during the cold weather. The total annual funding from the state of Kentucky and Harlan County to this fire department is a total of $12,000 per year. The Mountain News television station filmed a little parade, a blessing of the fire truck, a wet down of the fire truck, and this has gotten national attention for the city of Palm Coast and the Lower Clover Fork Fire Department. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I might add that in the news release, this gentleman delivered the truck on his own expense. I think not only does that small city in Kentucky owe him a debt of gratitude, but so do all of our residents. Thank you on behalf of all of Palm Coast for what you did. Next speaker.
Good morning. George Mayo, Palm Coast. A couple months ago, I asked the City Council in a workshop to consider a vote against the seismic testing that they want to do offshore for oil, and also a vote against fracking, which, as the mayor just said in this meeting, our water supply is more important than most anything that we have here in Palm Coast. I have an article here that December 17th from the Daytona News Journal concerning that seismic testing. This was out after our last meeting. And it has here that the seismic testing to be conducted by this company will be proprietary. Any information they gain, whether it's useful, harmful, or anything, will not be available to any state, local, or federal government. They do not have to share this with the public at all. And Oceana, an advocacy group, has said that very few, except other than New Smyrna Beach and Flagler Beach, nobody, and of course Flagler County, has come up and given their name in opposition to this. Your response to the meeting that you had was, since Flagler County had voted in opposition, you thought that was sufficient. And that's okay, but now citing this, I would again ask you to consider in a workshop to add, as it says, they're asking other cities and counties to add their name to this. I think there's strength in numbers, and I would like you to reconsider this in a workshop and possibly add a City of Palm Coast name to opposing this seismic testing. As they're saying, there's big jobs in recreational fishing out there, commercial fishing out there, and whether this will be harmful or not, even the Florida DEP is against this. And when Florida is against something like that, to me it seems serious. Although usually, rather than just rubber stamping it, they're against this. The second part would be also to consider in that part an opposition to the fracking. As you know, fracking, if that envelops our water system, then we're in deep trouble. That being said, two other things I have a question about is traffic, where Marketplace comes out to Belterre Boulevard, or Belterre Parkway, behind the Publix there. A couple weeks ago, I noticed there was a 4-car accident. I live south of 100, so I use that quite a bit. And it's always a dicey situation at that intersection. I don't know if anything can be done there. The only thing I can think of is you would have to have a one-way entrance heading east into the back of there, because cars exiting have to cut across. Almost everybody that uses that is, of course, heading south on Belterre. And you're cutting across both lanes of traffic. And one thing, if you had it
15 seconds, please.
Entrance only, and have people go out back down to Central Parkway there at the traffic light, it would be a little inconvenience, but it would be a lot safer. Thank you. I'll leave this with the Secretary.
Next speaker.
Jack Carroll from Palm Coast. I'd like to ask, when are we going to stop paying for the golf course and for the tennis courts? We had the workshop, and it showed that there's still $300 and some odd thousand in the hole. 5 years ago, maybe more, maybe less, we were assured by the company that maintains it that in 5 years we would break out even. We would have no debt involved. It's 5 years ago. And according to the chart, what I seen is we only gained $6,000 less in our debt than it's been. So we're running a debt just for the golf course of $350,000. Now, that they come up and they say we have to do something with our sand traps and our bunkers, whatever that is. That's another $24,000. Now, look, you know, I'd like to know just when we're going to say, well, listen, we can afford the golf course. I don't know, when are we going to stop putting this thing on our budget? You know, $300,000 is not a small pipe. You know, you don't go out and buy a pack of cigarettes with it. That's for sure. But it's got to end sometime. And it's, you know, with 60,000 people have to pay up for 400 people or 200 people, whatever it is, to have a good time and keep their profit, keep their fees low, there's something wrong somewhere. You want to play the game, pay the game. If you don't want to play, stay home, you know, like I do. Now, so that's what I'm asking. When, just when, are we going to break out even and stop paying for somebody else's enjoyment?
Thank you. Next speaker.
My name is John Brady. I live in Palm Coast. And let me say up front, I think we need to do something about the golf course. I came from a little town in Pennsylvania, and I think you all know the town, a little town of Bethlehem. Bethlehem has maintained a city municipal golf course for at least 50 years that I'm aware of. I spoke to the person who runs it. They have, on paper, $120,000 a year deficit. However, that is because they have a $200,000 legacy cost, that being the retirement benefits, which means without that legacy cost, there's an $80,000 a year profit. They can play golf 3 seasons. How do they make money? If we have a management company that's telling us we're losing money, what do we need them for? Why are we paying $96,000 to a company to tell us we're losing $350,000? Do away with that, it's a $250,000 loss. I enjoy the parks. I walk on St. Joe's Walkway. I certainly don't want to have a toll booth put up on St. Joe Walkway every time I walk. So I think we have an obligation to provide for recreation for our citizens. But we've got to find a way. I talked to a gentleman who golfs 3 times a week, one of them at that golf course. He said there are too many sand traps. We need to do something about that. Maybe we could have a volunteer as people come in from golf and ask them, what did you enjoy? What did you not enjoy? How do we get you to come back here? We've got to do something about it. We have to maintain it. We have to find a way to reduce the deficit. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach the podium, we close the public portion of the meeting, go back to council. But first, Mr. Landon, the issue of seismic testing and fracking, I think that deserves another go-around to look at it, especially in light of what the gentleman said. If that information is proprietary, that bothers me a little bit, because it's our environment, and if those tests show something detrimental, they have no obligation to share that with us. So I would like to see that back on the agenda, let council look at it for a second time around.
But Your Honor, isn't the fracking taking place in federal waters?
Well, this is
We don't have any jurisdiction.
We do not, but we certainly, as any other citizen, we have a right to offer our opinion.
Yeah, we could add our voice.
We could do it.
Mr. Mayor, Council, also, and probably all of you have seen this, but there's been a bill filed up in Tallahassee to preempt any local regulation of fracking. It is pending up there right now, and that would toss out and preempt any local ordinances regulating or banning fracking, and give the state control of overseeing the drilling method and triggering concerns. The proposal stops short of real oversight, according to this article. But I did want, just following up on, obviously there's an issue of would we have jurisdiction if it's in federal waters, but apart from that, there's an issue of whether we would have jurisdiction dependent upon what happens in Tallahassee over the next several months.
Well, Mr. Reichman, not only that, but regardless of what the state does, if the federal EPA or the federal Department of Commerce comes in and says it's okay, it's somewhat of a moot point.
I still think it's worthwhile that we express our opinion, for what
I
it's
don't have a
worth.
problem with that.
Second issue that was raised, the traffic at City Marketplace in Belterre. Could we have our traffic engineer look at it, see if there's something that could be done?
Will do.
Just don't
The issue
close
of
it, because I use that road a lot.
Yeah.
Drive more carefully.
You're right on target, though, because that's
Yeah.
that's the only thing that can be done, is to make it so that they can't do the left turn and go all the way across.
That is, I've never done that, because I look at the people trying to get across, and it's like they time it, they gun it, and hope they get all the way across without hitting something.
But if I may add, the other one that we need to look at real hard, if we can, and hopefully have your support, is there just north of Palm Coast Parkway on Boulder Rock Drive, where you have Chick-fil-A and the gas station and all of that traffic. If you ever get into that mess, because it's like 4 lanes going southbound, a couple, and it's another one where not allowing the left turn, making people go right and get in the left turn lane and do a U-turn. But there's drawbacks to that too. There's,
Just for the record, I spoke last week at the Indian Trails Neighborhood Watch Association, and that was an area that they expressed concerns about.
Yeah, we'll ask our traffic engineer to take a look at both of them and see if now's the time to start planning for some improvements in both of those. And, it all has to do with traffic counts and traffic flows and those type of things.
The issue of the golf course, the tennis course, and the city losing money, that is always fair game for city council to consider. On the one hand, you weigh the amenity value to the community as a whole. On the other hand, you look at the cost, the ongoing costs, and I'd be curious to see how Bethlehem can do it.
For one thing, Bethlehem, Pennsylvania has an enormous amount of industry that pays tax. Bethlehem Steel? No? Okay.
I was going to bring this up when my time came, but if I could inject now. After, there was an article in the news, I think that, in a newspaper that struck this, and last week after our presentation by Kemper Sports, what I would like to see is a presentation first that shows the use at the tennis courts and at the golf courses compared to our other amenities. So parks and trails, things like that. Because I just want to know if we're gonna label this an amenity, I'd like to see how it you know, how it compares to other amenities that we provide in both cost and use. Not so much as who's making money, who's not making, but use, you know. So if we've got 10 people using something that costs $1 million and 1,000 people using something that costs $10,000, maybe we need to look and say, okay, but the other thing that worries me, the only thing that troubles me here completely is, especially last week, I asked the question, I said, so are we expecting new golfers in the area? And the answer basically was no. So we're going to be pulling from other markets. And I'm thinking, those are private companies now we're talking about. So we're talking about a city-owned entity pulling clients from a privately owned entity. And so what's going to happen? At some point, it seems someone's going to close. And, you know, it bothers me that we're in competition. But I would like to also see, aside from the numbers, I would also like to understand from the beginning how this originated, how we ended up with the golf course. You know, why did we take it? How did we take it? You know, what was our objectives, that kind of stuff. So all of us, myself and everyone out there, gets a good overview of what the idea was behind this. Because it seems like we're saying, which I'm on board with, is that this is an amenity. Just like we pay for Holland Park, we got millions of dollars going into Holland Park. You know, this is just an amenity like that. We don't make money in Holland Park, you know, so maybe we shouldn't expect to make money in a golf course. But I'd like to understand first, get everybody on the same page that that's what that was our goal. Our goal wasn't to make money, if that's the case. You follow me?
I think that's a good point. I think I'm the only one on city council who was around when we acquired the golf course. It might be worthwhile to talk about the history of that acquisition.
Very, very familiar, would love to do that. Yep. And, you know, be happy to give numbers. Mr. Nobile, you know that, you know, Holland Park used an example, you know, we don't.
Guesstimates.
It's impossible to tell how many people use that, how many people walk down, you know, the trails and those type of things. But we do have some numbers, and we'll do that as long as you understand. We'll always have that little note at the bottom that recreational facilities that are free are impossible to come up with exact numbers. But I think it's worthwhile to talk about the history and the background and some of the other benefits people oftentimes do not realize, and that is the impact on the neighborhood of a golf course versus a closed golf course. And that goes all into that. If one closes, what neighborhood is going to be negatively impacted and all that, sure.
And I think that's a good point, Mr. Landon, because we can talk about the history of the golf course, and I think that's good. The problem is that we have no alternatives. We have a golf course that we can't sell. So if we can't sell it and we own it, we have to find a way to stop it from bleeding so much. A lot of the things that the gentleman from Pennsylvania suggested is an ongoing thing. We have a city audit team that goes down there every month and goes through those books with those people and makes them account for everything. If you got rid of Kemper and you hired your own people to run that course, the savings isn't enough to really justify that. So, I mean, it's good to discuss these things for public education, but at the end of the day, we're stuck with a golf course that nobody wants to buy, and we can't, and if we shut it down, the expenses don't stop.
Well said.
Discussion by city council of matters not on the agenda. Mr. McGuire, why don't we start with you, sir?
I'm shot my bolt.
Mr. Nobile.
I just wanted to say, Mr. Carr had made some comments. I thought we were going to discuss that too about Florida Park Drive. I know he got up. I just didn't want to ignore his comments.
His comments are consistent. We've looked at the statistical data. We've looked at the pollution numbers. We recognized that while Florida Park is a heavily traveled road, it does not have the same level of travel as other roads where the amount of pollutants in the air are greater, and yet still well below the EPA requirements. I mean, we can continue to discuss it, but
Let me ask a question, if I may, Mr. Mayor. When we four-lane Old Kings Road and add the extension, is that by chance going to alleviate any traffic through Florida Park?
Anytime you add capacity, it changes driver behavior. I'm not going to say, well, it's going to cut Florida Park Drive traffic.
But the
in half.
traffic flow, potentially, because I'm, like I said, like the mayor said, if it's people who live in there, there's nothing you can do about it. They live there. It's, but the trucks, that's the thing. I just can't, for the love of me, figure out why trucks.
Yeah, I definitely think that by having a direct connection, having Old Kings Road with a direct connection to Matanzas Woods Parkway.
Matanzas Woods.
That they will more likely come directly down all the way Old Kings Road versus when you had to go past the high school and then Forest Grove and do that. Well, then at that point, you had an option of going left or right.
Yeah.
So I think that does help when that occurs. That's one of the reasons why it was a priority of City Council to try to change some of the driver routes. No question it's going to help. Is it going to solve Mr. Carr's concerns? Not totally.
And I guess it's my turn. I have one comment, and it arises from Mr. Reichman's comment. And I believe it was 1968, the Florida legislature passed a bill providing for home rule, which essentially said that local governments, cities, villages, towns, counties, could enact legislation that they saw fit, providing it didn't impact or interfere or contradict with state legislation. That was 1968. 1969, they started the slippery slope. I can remember many years ago when I was on the city council in Norwood, New Jersey, we had a convenience store on a main street that was a north-south thoroughfare through 5 cities. And we were having problems with robberies there. And as I was vice mayor at the time, I suggested that we pass a local ordinance requiring that convenience stores that were going to be open after 10 p.m. had to either A, have a security system, cameras, and an alarm, or B, have at least 2 employees on duty. It passed, we enacted it, and actually we saw a decrease in the amount of crime. Whether it's a cause and effect, I don't know, but it's... First year I was on city council here, we had a problem with one of our convenience stores being robbed repeatedly. And I raised the same issue. Why couldn't we require them to, only to find out from the then city attorney that the state of Florida had preempted all regulation of convenience stores to them. The question I would ask you is, were they that concerned about convenience stores, or were they that susceptible to lobbying from special interest groups? We continue to see time after time after time local rule being eroded by our representatives in Tallahassee. So, something for you to think about next time you vote for who goes up to Tallahassee on our behalf.
And Mr. Mayor, if I could add one comment, thank you very much for that. The general reasoning, whether it is the real rationale or not, is that there are certain behaviors in certain areas of regulation that make sense to regulate on a statewide basis. And so the question becomes, whenever you have these proposals that come up in Tallahassee, is that the real reason for it? Is it necessary in this instance? In this instance, is there a good or more reasons why the regulation or the prohibition of this behavior, this use, this fracking, does that have to be done on a statewide basis? And if so, does that overcome the need for local communities to retain control over what happens in their community? And so you know, that's the issue that probably in a fair conversation should be had up in Tallahassee with representatives from local communities, counties, and cities.
I can understand that fracking is not, the impact of fracking is not restricted to the borders of Palm Coast or to the borders of Flagler County. And I can understand where you might need a more comprehensive look at it. Somebody robbing a convenience store in Palm Coast does not adversely affect Ormond Beach or Miami or, anyway. Enough said. I was just venting my frustrations with what's going on in the world today. I believe.
Nothing further, Mr. Mayor.
Discussion by city attorney. Matters not on the
That's yours?
agenda?
No, nothing further.
Discussion by city manager of items not on the agenda.
Cutting us out here, I think.
We tried.
Actually, I don't have much. Just a reminder that next Tuesday at 1 p.m. after your workshop is our favorite attorney will provide ethics training, 2 hours at that point, and then I think it's a couple of weeks after that. Yes, the next workshop, 1 o'clock again. That's the mandated, let's talk about state laws, mandated 4-hour ethic training every year for all elected officials.
Not all elected officials.
Local
elected officials.
Yes.
Thank you.
Tallahassee is above and beyond reproach when it comes to ethics.
Well, they're not gonna go against ethics, are they? Yeah. Or sunshine, right.
They don't have to follow
Have
sunshine
to do that
law,
either.
so why would they have to? No, okay, I'll be nice.
Anything else, Mr. Landry?
That's all I have, Mayor. Thank you.
Trusted.
Madam Vice Mayor,
Meeting adjourned.
motion to adjourn. We are adjourned. Thank you very much, everyone.